This is Bear for the Bare Truth and the Apocalypse Jones Show. So today I'm going to do a segment on the universal basic income as requested by one of the people who watched one of my previous videos, and thank you for that. So it's something that's been put forward in government as a potential solution to the impending crisis that a lot of people, financial crisis and debt crisis, a lot of people are facing with the current, like lockdown. So many non-essential workers have been either put furloughed so that they are on standby, or that they're out of work. Now, there have been mechanisms and things that have been put in place. Obviously, there's this support for self-employed workers, support for PAYE, 80% of their earnings, what have you, like that, which is brilliant. There needs to be a support mechanism, but a universal basic income, I think, would have been an easier and much less controversial system to roll out. It would have been able to roll out much quicker because it's a non-means tested. So that it's a universal basic income. The first time this was proposed was in the 16th century, a book called Utopia by Thomas More, released in 1516. And in that, he basically proposed the idea where, in this perfect state, the utopia, the government would pay each citizen a non-means tested, so an automatic payment that never changed, and it was paid regardless of social standing, personal finances or situation. It was an automatic payment, and it was paid every month or week for the rest of their lives. And what it meant is that they would never drop below a poverty level. They would never find themselves unable to sustain their basic standards of living. And if there isn't a great recommendation for that, in happier times, outside of the current crisis, I don't know what is. How they could have rolled this out is simply just said that everybody who is currently out of work applies for this payment, and it will automatically be paid. And that facility is out there. They would have been able to do it. Now, many people will say, well, we've got an existing benefit system. Well, you've got to think that people applying for universal credit, it's all got to be mean tested. There's further administration, there's phone calls, there's interviews. The costs involved behind the scenes are absorbent. The increased costs of people having to already negotiate what has been repeatedly called a failing social welfare system anyway. It's causing further delays, it's causing more stress. This could have just been rolled out straight away from any worker that suddenly finds themselves in a position where they're no longer able to be employed. And also as well, I think it's possible this should have really been rolled out, if they were going to do it, just carte blanche, that for the duration of the lockdown, that every person should realistically get this payment. Now, that would be a lot of money, I'm not going to deny that. And with a universal basic income, the economic modelling, the way that it has to be implemented, the funding streams, they're things that have to be thought of. But if you think about the money that's suddenly just been found to support businesses, the bailouts, the fact that, unlike other European countries that have requisitioned private healthcare firms' hospital beds and just said that they're now back into public ownership, we're paying 2.4 million a day for 8,000 beds across Britain at the moment. There is money just suddenly being found, springing out of nowhere, considering we've just gone through 10 years of austerity and brutal cuts that are now being exposed as such a detriment, not only to our health service, but our social welfare systems. It amazes me that people aren't calling this out more. So, to give you a bit of an idea of how much this would potentially cost, so say that we did just suddenly roll it out in the current crisis to everybody, every working age adult. Every person would get a payment, say, of £1,000 a month. Now, these figures I've taken, by the way, from a Financial Times article that was published on the 18th of March this year. Now, I really recommend going and reading this article, by the way. It's really concise, really clear information, and I'm only going to just drop in a couple of the most salient points from it. So, as I say, £1,000 a month, universal basic income payment to every working age adult and pensioner in this country. That would cost, realistically, 66 billion a month. Now, obviously, that's a very high figure, but if you think that the government was happy to pay 500 billion to the financial industry back in 2008 when it crashed, and bail out bankers, and to be fair, some of the wealthiest in society, and then we in turn were forced to deal with those payments by the austerity mandate since that point of cut after cut after cut. So, when you put that into respect, that these figures aren't that high. And when we're talking about the citizens of this nation, those most already in need, I don't think there is any price that is too high. And I also think as well, if you look at it, so everybody's getting this payment, they're not going to be splashing out on holidays because they can't go anywhere. They're not going to be splashing out on luxury goods as per se, because they haven't got the ability to buy them. The budget's already constrained. This money will be going into shops, into essential retailers. It would be going directly back into the economy and provide an economic stimulus at a time when we're already looking at a severe slump in the market, potentially worse than the crash in 1929. The Wall Street crash. So I don't think that there can be, in the current crisis, looking outside in other times, yes, there would have to be more thorough economic modelling and it would have to potentially be looked into a lot deeper. But right now, I think it would solve so many issues and it would help, give so much relief to so many families and individuals who currently are already in a state of fear and panic, because of what's going on. It would mean that they would have that surety, and they would know that as long as this crisis goes on, that they would be able to support and sustain themselves. So I don't think that's something you can really put a price on. Now, talking about looking into that price, how much that would cost, that would be, so 66 billion a month, that would be 792 billion a year. Now, just for a bit of perspective, the welfare state, or rather the percentage of the total government spending and budget on our welfare state in 2017, I've got these figures from the Office of National Statistics, was 264 billion. So that's a massive increase in the costings there. Currently, though, we're in extraordinary times, so I believe that these extraordinary measures aren't out of the ordinary. I think they should be what should be being done. But that 264 billion spent in 2017, that was the equivalent of 34% of our total government spend. So that is quite a percentage. Interestingly, though, when you look at how that's broken down, and it involves many different factors: payments, supports to family, social welfare and social care systems. But if you look at how much that was, say, just in reference to the unemployed benefits, which is something that's stigmatised in the media, it's pushed out there, people should be in work, that's what universal credit is, to help people back into work. The total of that 264 billion for unemployed benefits was 2 billion. Whereas 111 billion was for pensions, which I believe should be higher anyway, because we have one of the lowest pension rates in the developed world. So, the idea, the way, if you actually start looking into these statistics, how much this is, realistically, from 2 billion to 66 billion, it's still just over half of what we're already paying for pensions. And once again, I don't think that this is outside the realms of possibility when you think that we've actually been paying so little of our gross domestic product, our gross government spending on this in the past. And now, once again, in extraordinary circumstances, I don't see why not. Now, I believe as well that this is a scheme that could be easily and adequately funded going forward as well. Just a quote from an independent article from the 28th of April last year. This is from the Tax Justice Network, who's been doing work on corporate tax avoidance globally. UK has single-handedly done the most to break down global corporate tax systems, resulting in the equivalent loss of £395 billion a year globally. And how they do this, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it works, but this is the basics I can get from that same article. It's something called the transfer price system. So what they do, you've got a multinational corporation, they've got two subsidiaries in two countries. What they can do is transfer these goods, either physically or hypothetically, across the borders between these two, figure out the costings of how much that product will be worth individually, and then offset it about how much they would have earned possibly. If I sound confused, I am. It's a very bizarre system, but essentially what it means is that the corporations can go around to a government and say, oh, this is how much we would have earned. Literally how much we would have earned. None of this actual figures, that's how much money we earn, that's what went through there. Oh no, hypothetically, in a free market that doesn't actually technically exist, a competitive global free market because we're a multinational controller, this is how much we would have earned, so realistically we think we haven't earned anything. And on this goes. So, to give you ideas as well about how much money is out there at the moment, I mean, we've all heard these stories about Virgin, Richard Branson forcing his staff to take unpaid leave, but then in turn asking for a bailout. And when I say about the 2.4 million that's been paid to Richard Branson, part of it, for Virgin Care, his own medical company. And his history with the NHS as well is a very checkered one. Really, I'd recommend doing some research on Richard Branson and what he's been up to and suing the NHS for loss of contracts. That man very much was not high in my estimation, but loses it every second. And Jeff Bezos, I mean, the money that guy himself controls, and now, forcing staff to take unpaid leave, not enforcing social distancing. That Amazon have just fired a member of their staff in their Seattle transport hub, delivery hub, who actually was organising protests about lack of social distancing and unsafe practices during this crisis. So they've fired somebody who's trying to stand up. Retaliatory. It's already been investigated by the US government, and I really do hope that they fall on the side of those workers, because once again, these stories about Amazon have been there before this. It only seems to be getting worse. So these billionaires, multimillionaires, from a Bloomberg article in December 12th last year, the world's richest 0.1% gained last year in personal wealth $1.2 trillion. Trillion dollars, 1.2. And that equates to 26 people on this planet currently own 50% of the wealth. They control as much as the poorest 50%. Well, so it's not 50% of wealth, it's more a case that 3.8 billion people in this world's combined wealth is the equivalent of the 26 richest. This nothing like the situation has been in place since 1929, before the Wall Street crash and the super rich back then. And I believe that money hoarding, that corporate control by individuals, with many other factors, is what directly led to that crash back then as well. We've actually seen a wipe-off of stock prices recently more severe in one day than the 1929 crash. It's just we have more robust mechanisms to try and counter economic crisis now. So, but it is looking like we are going to see the economy tank out, and essentially we're going to lose so many jobs, so many industries. Once again, coming back to this universal basic income, it's a way to help support individuals. And one way they could do that, as I've just said from these factors, is they could realistically just tax the corporations that have been able to avoid it. We're in extraordinary times, and extraordinary measures need to be taken. The money and wealth is out there. It always has been. But the current ideology of neoliberalism and crony capitalism has forced us down a route where people who generate profit are seen more important than the actual people themselves. And I think, and I hope, that this crisis may start to make people realise what has been going on for so long. That these people actually, when push comes to shove and society is in peril, because we are in peril in many ways, we've no idea what's going to happen with this. I hope that we're out of lockdown in a couple of months. I hope that my worries as being here for 12 months are unfounded. I really do. But realistically, we know so little. More that's coming in from countries abroad. The death rates are skyrocketing in other countries as well, looking at Spain and Italy. That we just don't know what's going to happen. But what we need to now is those who've been allowed to generate ridiculous amounts of wealth, they should be stepping up to the plate, but they're not. In fact, they're using this to their advantage. They're making more money. Hedge fund managers are betting against the tanking of the economy and making millions. It's still business as usual. And if one example of that is not classic enough, it's the ventilator scandal. Dyson have never made ventilators before. Yeah, they're a very good company, but to be fair, Dyson's been moving most of his manufacturing base out of this country for years, mainly due to Brexit as well, even though he was a proponent of it. But there was a company, I'm sure you've seen this in the news, but there's a company that had 25,000 ventilators ready to give to the government. They got no reply, and so they shipped them elsewhere. But Dyson, who's never made a ventilator before, that company has been given a contract to make them, taking time to switch over the manufacturing base and make a model that's viable and NHS safe, to a certain standard of usage. And he's a major Tory party donor. Think of the mindset of an individual or a government that still thinks we've got to give jobs for the boys, bit of a backhander, think of the money, when people are dying, and potentially thousands are going to die in this country. So I hope that's been a brief explanation of universal basic income and the fact that it isn't technically that financially unaffordable if everybody in our society paid their way. If you'd like me to go more into depth to it, please do let me know. I'll quite happily do another segment on it. And also, if there's anything else you want me to talk about as well, please do keep those suggestions coming. So I'd like to just finish with saying again, a universal basic income could support everybody in this country, if only done in a short interim period while we're going through this crisis. But it can have such bigger ramifications. We could see an eradication of the stigmatisation around being out of work. We could see a benefit to individual people's mental health and social welfare. You know, it would be, I think, astronomical. And also, what it would allow people to do as well is really follow their passions. And I think that the creativity and the artistic renaissance that could come from it would be second to none. And for those who say that, well, that isn't that important to society, anybody who spent their time binge watching TV, trolling on the internet, reading books, anything that involves art, I think we all really right now realise the value of art and what it has given us and how much it is a succour to us in times of stress and hardship. So, if you like the message I'm pushing across in this one, I suggest maybe dropping an email to your MP, talking to social justice groups, doing your own research. Have a look into this one, but I really think the universal basic income could be a game changer, not just now, but for our society going forward. So, thank you for tuning in again. This is Bear for the Bare Truth, the Apocalypse Jones Show. If you like my video, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Take care, guys.